Cruise workers are trained to smile through late requests, entitled passengers, and complaints they had nothing to do with. But behind every professional smile is a human being quietly keeping score. These are 17 things crew members genuinely hate. Passengers repeated on every ship, every sailing. Understanding them makes you a better passenger, and a better passenger gets better service. Number 1. Passengers who skip the muster drill. This one isn't just annoying, it's the thing crew members feel in their bones because they know exactly what it costs in real time. The muster drill is not a formality. It's a legal requirement under the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, and the crew is personally responsible for accounting for every single person on board. When passengers hide in their cabins, duck out early, or treat the assembly like an optional preview event, crew members spend extra time tracking people down, rerunning head counts, and holding up a departure timeline that affects thousands of other guests and dozens of port schedules downstream. They don't say anything because they can't, but they notice. They always notice, and your face gets remembered before the ship has even left the dock. Number 2, the "don't you know who I am" passenger. There's a specific type of guest that crew members can identify from across the atrium. The one who arrives at the service desk with their loyalty card already extended before they finish their opening sentence. The one who drops a corporate name in the first 30 seconds of what should have been a simple request. Here's what experienced crew members understand that these passengers don't. Status doesn't change the rules, it changes the mood. When someone leads with rank instead of a request, the person across the desk stops thinking, well, how do I help this guest? And starts thinking, how do I manage this situation? That shift costs the passenger something real. The version of service that actually feels warm and personal. The guests who consistently receive the best treatment are almost never the loudest about their tier. They're the ones who make it easy to say yes. Number 3. Passengers who make housekeeping into a treasure hunt. Cabin stewards carry a workload that most passengers never fully register. On a typical sailing day, a single steward is responsible for somewhere between 14 and 22 cabins depending on the ship class and itinerary. Every one gets turned over. Every one gets inspected. The clock doesn't pause for anyone. What derails the schedule isn't mess. Stewards are thoroughly trained for mess. What derails it is chaos. Clothes layered over the safe so it can't be checked. Personal items covering every available flat space with no clear working path. Toiletries spread bank to bank across the bathroom counter in a way that makes proper cleaning physically impossible without touching belongings that guests may later claim were moved without permission. Stewards aren't there to assess how you live. They're there to reset the space and move forward. A cabin that turns a 15-minute job into a 30-minute obstacle course sends that delay straight into every cabin that follows for the rest of the shift. Number 4. Items left on the bed. Why, this one drives stewards crazy. This one deserves its own entry because it is such a specific, invisible frustration that the vast majority of passengers have no awareness they're causing it. Here's the reality. When a steward enters your cabin for turn down or midday refresh, the bed is the operational anchor of the entire job. Everything flows from it. It sets the visual standard for the cabin. It demands the most physical effort, and it has to be completed correctly because it's the first thing guests notice when they walk back in. The problem is constant. Passengers leave things on the bed without thinking. Towels, books, laptops, bags packed for a shore excursion, clothes staged for dinner, charging cables still connected to devices, sunscreen, port souvenirs placed there temporarily and then forgotten. A steward cannot make the bed around those items. They cannot move personal belongings without accepting the risk that a guest later claims something was lost, misplaced, or damaged. Every occupied bed becomes a judgment call. Move it, skip it, or leave a note explaining why it wasn't done. Every one of those options costs time. Across a block of 20 cabins, the delays stack into something that genuinely disrupts the steward's entire day. And the frustration is compounded by the fact that it is almost never deliberate, which means it never stops happening, sailing after sailing, year after year. The fix takes 10 seconds. Move your things off the bed before you leave the cabin. That's it. Number 5. Requests that land right at shift change. Every ship operates on overlapping schedules, and shift transitions are where the soft spots live. There's a window, sometimes brief, sometimes longer depending on the department, where the outgoing crew is in closeout mode and the incoming crew is still orienting. Requests that arrive in that window don't vanish. They get handed off verbally or through notes, and handoffs, however well-intentioned, are where details erode and things quietly fall through the gaps. Crew members aren't frustrated by the request itself, they're frustrated by the timing, because they can already see how the chain of custody breaks down. And when the gap eventually produces a guest complaint, the crew member who took the original request often absorbs the follow-up, even when they executed their part perfectly. If a request matters and you have timing flexibility, place it when the shift is clearly in its working rhythm. The results are measurably better. Number 6. Late night calls for non-emergencies. Front desk staffing runs around the clock on every major cruise ship. That commitment is real, and crew members honor it regardless of the hour. What they quietly struggle with is the non-urgent call that treats the overnight desk like a personal concierge operating on no time constraints. A pillow that feels slightly too firm. A question about tomorrow's excursion meeting time that the daily program already answers. A request for extra hangers that has no urgency attached to it but arrives at 2 a.m. anyway. The deeper issue isn't just the inconvenience. The skeleton crew working overnight carries responsibility for genuine emergencies, medical interventions, safety incidents, real guest crises that require immediate focused attention. Every non-urgent call redirects bandwidth away from that coverage. Crew members take every call professionally regardless, but the passenger who waits until morning for a non-urgent request is treated very differently in the crew's internal mental ledger than the one who doesn't. Number 7. Tip removal mid-cruise. This topic carries more weight in crew culture than most passengers ever realize, and it's worth being direct about why. When automatic gratuities are removed, crew members notice, and not just because of the financial impact, though that impact is tangible and meaningful. They notice because of what the act communicates. Automatic gratuities on most major lines aren't a single payment to a single person. They're distributed across departments that passengers may never directly interact with. Galley workers, laundry crew, behind-the-scenes cabin service teams, the people managing logistics at every hour of the day. Removing gratuities affects all of them. And the version that crew members find most demoralizing isn't the guest with a legitimate unresolved complaint. It's the preemptive removal before issues are raised, or the quiet removal after a perfectly normal week that no one can explain. If something went wrong, bring it to guest services. Real service failures can often be addressed in ways that feel far better for everyone than a silent adjustment on the final morning. Now, if this is giving you a genuinely different picture of how a cruise ship actually operates, hit subscribe before we keep going. Now, the next section covers the patterns that affect dining crew, deck staff, and the people you interact with most. And a few of these will change how you move through the ship. Number 8. Buffet hoarding. This is the one that puts dining crew in a position they can't easily talk their way out of, because the damage is done before they can intervene. A passenger who loads a plate past any reasonable portion isn't just taking more than they need. They're pulling from a replenishment system calibrated around expected consumption behavior. When a single station empties faster than the kitchen planned for, the line stalls, the replenishment team scrambles, and the 30 guests who arrive 2 minutes later find empty trays and no explanation they can immediately see. Those guests complain, and the complaint goes to the crew members standing nearby, who had nothing to do with the depletion and no mechanism to prevent it once it was in motion. The ship didn't run out of food. One decision sent a ripple through a system designed for shared access, and the crew absorbed every word of the reaction. Number 9. Passengers who ignore seasickness until it's too late. The medical teams on cruise ships talk about this pattern with remarkable consistency, and the consequences reach well beyond the medical center. A guest begins feeling unwell. They push through it, through lunch, through an afternoon shore excursion, through the pre-dinner drinks, because stopping feels like surrendering the trip. By the time they finally seek help, what would have been a straightforward early intervention has become something that requires sustained medical attention, additional resources, and pulled-in staff from other areas of the ship. But the impact doesn't stay contained. When the situation becomes unavoidable in a public space, it's not just the medical team that responds. It's dining staff, housekeeping, deck crew, all redirecting from full workloads without warning or preparation. Motion sickness patches, wristbands, and antihistamines work best applied before symptoms take hold. Crew members know this instinctively. They wish passengers heading into their first rough crossing knew it too. Number 10. The complaint that was never going to be solved on board. There is a category of guest frustration that crew members recognize immediately and brace for. The complaint rooted entirely in a corporate or pre-booking decision that no one on the ship has any authority to reverse. A promotional rate the passenger didn't qualify for. A policy set at headquarters that frontline crew had no involvement in creating. A loyalty benefit that was changed before the sailing and communicated through channels the passenger didn't see. The crew member listening to this cannot fix it. They can document it, escalate it through the appropriate internal channels, and follow up as far as their role allows. What they cannot do is override a decision made by a department that doesn't answer to ship operations. The constructive path is to ask directly what the right escalation process looks like and use it. That process exists and it works. 40 minutes of redirected frustration at someone without authority produces neither resolution nor relief. Just an exhausted crew member carrying a conversation they had no power to conclude. Number 11. Deck chair reservation culture. Pool deck crew operate in a structural conflict that begins before most passengers have had their first coffee, and there is genuinely no clean resolution available to them. A guest claims 3 chairs with towels at 7 a.m. and doesn't return until mid-morning. A second guest arrives at 10 a.m. and asks crew why the deck appears full when most chairs are empty. The crew member now has to navigate a dispute they didn't start, using whatever enforcement tools the ship's policy actually provides, which, on most lines, is less than the posted rules suggest. The chair reservation policy exists on paper. Enforcement is inconsistent by ship, by itinerary, and by how willing individual crew members are to absorb the confrontation that follows when they actually apply it. The crew member in the middle absorbs frustration from the guest who claims territorial rights and from the guest who feels the entire system is rigged against latecomers. Both guests are partially right. The crew member was never going to win this conversation before it started. Number 12. Passengers who bring outside food into specialty restaurants. Dining staff in specialty venues deal with this more frequently than the guest experience suggests, and their options in the moment are all uncomfortable. A guest arrives carrying a buffet plate just in case, a snack purchased at the last port, or a bottle of wine they'd prefer not to pay corkage on. The server now has an unverified food item in a controlled dining environment in front of other paying guests with no way to assess what it is or how it was stored. Asking the guest to remove it risks a public scene. Allowing it sets a precedent and creates a genuine health and standards issue that the server is personally accountable for. The staff in specialty restaurants didn't draft the food safety policies. They're simply the ones standing in the room when those policies collide with a passenger who decided the rules were suggestions. Number 13. The elevator hold. Small, relentless, and cumulative. That is exactly how crew members would describe this one. A ship carrying several thousand passengers puts sustained pressure on every elevator bank across every deck throughout the entire day. When a single door hold extends for 15 or 20 seconds, waiting for a partner still rolling around the corner, finishing a sentence before stepping in, simply not registering that the doors have been open long enough, it generates a delay that cascades to every floor waiting for that car. Crew members route through crew corridors and service elevators specifically to absorb operational movement off the public lifts. When that isn't possible and the public elevator arrives already running late from a chain of extended holds, those minutes disappear from a shift that tracks time in increments most passengers don't see. Individually, a held elevator is nothing. Multiplied across a full sea day on a large ship, it becomes a consistent, low-level drain that crew members feel in a way that's hard to articulate and impossible to fix from their position. Number 14. Passengers who treat crew as invisible. This is the one nobody files a report about because there's no form for it. It lives entirely in how the job feels at the end of a 10-hour shift. The passenger who passes through multiple service interactions across a full day without once acknowledging the person on the other side. No eye contact, no hello. Requests delivered to the general space rather than to a human being. An entire relationship conducted as though the crew member is a function rather than a person. Crew members work months away from their families, in conditions most passengers don't think about, for hours that extend well past what the polished service surface suggests. They're not asking for sustained conversations or expressions of gratitude. They're asking for the same basic recognition that passes between any two people sharing the same physical space. The passengers who extend that naturally, a hello, a genuine thank you, a moment of actual eye contact, get something in return that can't be scheduled or standardized. And the passengers who don't are remembered for exactly that, for the entire duration of the voyage. Number 15. Last day luggage chaos in the hallway. Debarkation is the highest pressure operational window of the entire voyage, and the margin for error is essentially zero. Thousands of bags have to be set out by guests, collected by crew, sorted by zone, and staged for offloading, all within a timeline that doesn't shift, because the ship has a full turnaround to complete before the next group of passengers boards later that same day. Port scheduling doesn't accommodate delays originating from disorganized luggage handling. Bags placed outside the cabin late, positioned in the wrong corridor section, or missing their zone tags force individual searches that eat time from a process with no buffer built in. A single misrouted bag in the wrong staging area can trigger a delay that runs far past the passenger who caused it, affecting guests still waiting to disembark, crew managing zones further down the corridor, and portside logistics waiting on the other side of the gangway. The instructions exist. The tags are provided and the window is clearly communicated. The crew members managing debarkation night are simply the ones absorbing the consequences when those things are ignored. Number 16. Complaints about the weather. Every experienced crew member eventually develops a private phrase for this situation. Something short they repeat internally to get through the next 10 minutes. Nobody on the ship controls the weather. Passengers understand this rationally. But when the excursion cancels, when the outdoor deck closes, when rough conditions push an entire evening's programming indoors, the disappointment has to go somewhere, and it consistently finds the nearest crew member regardless of their department or their actual connection to the disrupted plan. What makes this harder is that crew members are absorbing the same conditions passengers are complaining about, with less access to the ship's comfort spaces and more operational obligations to fulfill regardless of sea state. A rough crossing that inconveniences a guest inconveniences the crew member considerably more, just invisibly. The best crew members have usually reached a point where they understand that weather complaints aren't really about the weather. They're about a trip not matching its mental picture. That's what they're actually responding to. It just always arrives wearing a forecast. Number 17. the guest who treats every meal like a test. Dining crew can handle special requests. They handle dietary restrictions, allergy protocols, cultural preferences, and genuine medical needs across every service period, every day, at a level that most land-based restaurants could find difficult to sustain. What they can't as easily absorb is the guest who isn't actually asking for anything specific. They're evaluating. Every modification is a probe. Every plate return is an assertion of control. The standard being applied was never communicated because it was never really about the food. It's about the dynamic. Experienced servers can typically identify this pattern by the second course. The tells are consistent. Modifications that shift after they're accommodated. Returns that happen after most of the plate has been eaten. A general atmosphere of pending dissatisfaction that no dish adjustment ever fully resolves. They will take care of that guest through every course with the same standard of professionalism extended to every other table. But it's the interaction that gets discussed afterward and the one that accumulates quietly across a long contract into the specific category of exhaustion that doesn't come from physical work. None of these require dramatic changes. They're small behaviors with outsized ripple effects, and most passengers who do them have no idea. The crew running your ship work harder than the polished surfaces suggest. A small shift in awareness makes their job easier and your experience better. Hit like, subscribe, and watch the next video. Your voyage is just beginning.